everyone. Welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for developing a successful veterinary practice and career. I'm Michael Walker, a leadership coach and mediator, and one of the co-hosts of the Veterinary Business Podcast. On this podcast, we bring you insights and expertise from industry-leading doctors, experts, and thought leaders. We cover a wide range of topics, including practice management, marketing strategies, leadership development, finance, HR best practices, AI, law, and much more. Whether you're a practicing veterinarian, a practice owner, practice manager, or a student studying to be a veterinarian, this podcast is tailored to help you navigate the unique challenges and opportunities in the business of veterinary medicine. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to visit Veterinary Business Institute, all one word, veterinarybusinessinstitute.com for additional resources and tools to support your growth. And remember, you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. Well, today I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Natalie Fayman. It is great to have you here with us today, Doctor.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And before we dig into, I'm going to share a little bit about your background to our listeners. Dr. Fayman is a trailblazer at the intersection of veterinary medicine, wellness, and leadership. With over 3 decades of experience, 24 of them in emergency and critical care, she's seen firsthand how stress, burnout, and conflict can take a toll on a veterinary professional. Now, as the only person in the U.S. certified both as a doctor of veterinary medicine and a certified positive intelligence coach, she helps veterinary teams and healthcare providers heal from the inside out. Through her business, No Limits Coaching, LLC, Dr. Fayman empowers clients to regain their vitality, rebuild team harmony, and reclaim joy in their works and lives. Boy, do we ever need some of that these days. Her science-backed, personalized coaching programs address the hidden drivers of stress and self-sabotage while fostering resilience, emotional intelligence, and sustainable leadership. Dr. Fayman is a certified ICF professional coach and serves as a mentor for early career vets through Mentor Vet. Her transformative journey includes personal reinvention, losing 85 pounds, wow, and building a thriving coaching business and dedicating herself to helping others break free from burnout and rediscover their purpose. Our topic today is people-pleasing, burnout, and building a resilient mind in veterinary medicine. Well, I think we've got the right person for the theme. Dr. Fayman, I'm excited to jump right into the questions, but first off, I always love to ask the question, just could you share with us, with our listeners, what drove your passion for mental health and veterinary medicine?
Thank you. I absolutely went through my own burnout journey many, many times, as you might imagine, working 24 years in the ER. You can only keep that up for so long, sleeping 3 hours a night, never seeing your family, never having a personal life, taking crappy care of yourself. So I came to terms with my own mortality about the point where I had to leave the ER and go into general practice because it was becoming very clear that I was going to drop dead if I didn't. And it was really just more of the same, just a little bit less intense. So ironically, what started me on my coaching journey really had nothing to do with veterinary medicine at first. I had a lifelong habit of managing my emotions with food, as a lot of people do, and living a highly stressful life and very neglectful of my self-care. My weight was creeping up. And I had tried all the diets and all the workout programs and just had gotten to a pinnacle of despair, thinking, oh, this is never going to be fixed. And I'm just going to have to get used to being fat and miserable. Well, one day I stumbled across a weight loss group that had a completely different approach. It was led by a life coach, and there was no good or bad foods. And there was no like calorie limits or programs that you had to follow, but it was a 100% mindset-based approach. Why are you eating when you're not hungry? To soothe your sadness, to soothe your loneliness. So really learning how to examine my thought processes and my emotions and to find better ways of managing that without food had such a profoundly transformational effect on me. The weight loss was the least benefit that I got. My relationships got better. My overall stress level went down. My overall satisfaction with my life went up. And it just hit me like, this is exactly the tool that we need in veterinary medicine. Not that we're all overeating to soothe our emotions, but there's so many of us, we feel kind of like stuck and trapped and like, this is as good as it's ever going to get. And this is my fate for the rest of my life. And, people don't really know where to go from there. So after the coach training program and then finding positive intelligence, I feel like this is the missing piece that is going to be so profoundly transformational for the whole veterinary profession. That I see now, this is my way of giving back to my profession long past the day when I'm not going to be able to do the physical work in the clinic anymore.
Wow, what a great summary. I love the journey. It would be hard to imagine. I have a daughter who just graduated as a nurse just couple of years ago, and she started in the emergency department, and she'd tell us the stories. So it was like, but she was working there. She certainly had responsibilities, but she wasn't a doctor there. I can't imagine. The intensity would be quite something, and I can appreciate that. And I think, we just did the other night, we did maybe it was about, it would be on it'd be on the link I mentioned earlier. I'll give that to our listeners later, but we did one on mental health and just talking about where mental health was. And a couple of things that really came out of that was that it seemed like doctors had not given themselves permission, as to say, it's okay not to be okay, and be able to say that. And secondly, it's okay not to be perfect, and to actually be able to say that. And secondly, it's okay to not know, but I'll find out. And it was like this. We're having these but it was really, and and the next question I just really want to kind of lean into is just this whole, can you discuss the current state of mental health in the veterinary profession, and what factors contribute to the high rates of burnout and stress among veterinarians?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as far as burnout, I was looking at some studies, and AVMA did a study in 2020 that found that over 50% of veterinarians in the United States, and this study was over 15,000 veterinarians, over 50% of them reported suffering from burnout. Other studies, those numbers are actually much higher. 35% have reported loss of satisfaction with their career. And more than 60% were suffering from what they call secondary traumatic stress. In other words, experiencing the emotional trauma of the clients, the people that we work with on a daily basis, giving of ourselves to try and comfort and console them, actually inflicts trauma on us. Interestingly enough, burnout was actually more prevalent in this same study with recent graduates and veterinarians that work in corporate practices. So then it kind of led me to look up like depression and suicide rates, and NOMV, the Not One More Vet group, your listeners may be familiar with. The suicide rate among veterinarians is 3 to 5 times the rate of the general population. And veterinarians are 1.5 times more likely to have depression than the general population. So when I say this when I talk about these things to people who are not working in vet med, they are always shocked because people have no idea. And so the first question they ask is, well, what's the reason for that? People, I think the general public has this idea that if we have to do a euthanasia, that's what's hitting us so hard emotionally. And that is part of it, but that's only a small part of it. So there's the emotional roller coaster with the clients and the coworkers. You come from a really emotionally intense, draining situation like a euthanasia, and then you have to walk right into the next exam room with a cute little puppy and be all happy. And you really have to kind of channel your emotions to suit the situation. There's intense pressure in a lot of practices to handle high caseloads and to meet financial targets that may or may not be realistic. There's a huge amount of financial pressure when we graduate from veterinary school, with anywhere from $250,000 or more in debt just from our education. There's a perception of ungratefulness from clients and sometimes our bosses and the people that we report to. Conflicts with coworkers, the cliques and bullying and being micromanaged. We're expected to be able to perform at this super high level without having adequate staff or the necessary supplies or equipment all the time. There's a complete lack of respect for personal boundaries in a lot of practices, and I think in the profession in general. And definitely when I graduated, there was just this expectation that you were going to be happy to work 70, 80 hours a week and never see your family and just keep that up until you fell over dead. But even today, you know, we're expected to work through lunch and skip our breaks and stay past closing time and work into the night and be available on our phone or text or email 24/7. And so people eventually, they just get to the point where they are exhausted. They have completely lost touch with their families and their social connections. They have no quality of life. And no matter how hard they try, no matter how much they give, it is just never enough. And from a business perspective, by the time your employees, whether it's a veterinarian or your manager or your technicians, by the time that person has gotten to the end of their rope mentally and emotionally, they've been disengaged for a very long time. And the quality of their work and their productivity has been suffering for a long time. And therefore, the business has also been suffering.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. I think you're just the way you lay that out. Some of the journey to this place of burnout is culture, the structure. Some of it's self-induced. Some of it is other-induced, and I think that we know that in the general population, just the level of disengagement of people is higher than it's ever been. And so why would veterinarians? I always think somebody said on a previous webinar one time, said, imagine that if none of your patients could talk to you and you have to make decisions about their life, and you have a strength about empathy and compassion that's probably out of balance. And boy, oh boy, that's tough. It is really tough. I'm so grateful. I'm a pet lover all day long. I've got dogs and cats, but I just have such a heart for that journey that you're championing, Doctor. I think it's so important.
Thank you. It's not just me. It's all of us collectively. We are all kind of on the same ship. We're just not all rowing in the same direction at the same time.
Well, and that's what today is a bit about, to start to reveal some of the ribs in the boat in terms of what we need to do to support that rowing system. So one of the things I kind of just want to talk a bit about, people pleasing and burnout, and unfortunately they're both exist there, and that of course impacts boundaries. So how do people pleasing tendencies affect veterinarians, particularly in maintaining boundaries and managing client expectations? And what strategies might you have to help mitigate these effects?
That's a very timely question. I think veterinary medicine attracts pleasers, and it also attracts perfectionists. And that can be a really tough combination to deal with. Because a lot of times with people pleasers, and I count myself in this group 100%, there are no boundaries. And that's the problem, because we are so driven to make sure that everyone around us gets what they need, that very often it comes at our own expense. So again, we'll work through lunch to make sure that we take care of a sick pet so that they don't have to go to the ER. We'll work late and miss out on time with our families or dinner plans that we had so that we can accommodate a client that walked in at the end of the day. We go without sleep and we answer calls when we're on vacation. So you do this day after day after day for decades, and you can imagine what that does to your quality of life and to your personal relationships, your support system. So strategies to try and either pull yourself out of this or prevent yourself from falling into it. Number one is, for all my pleasers out there, make friends with discomfort, because pleasers are very uncomfortable saying no. And we feel guilty standing up for our own boundaries and claiming our own time for ourselves. So tolerance for discomfort is a skill just like any other. The more you practice it, the better you get. And so what I tell people that feel guilty saying no is just start practicing in small ways. Start saying no or not yet to little things at first and watch how people respond to that. So, as pleasers, what we're afraid of is that people will lose respect for us or that they won't like us if we say no. And most of the time, that doesn't happen. People, this is kind of ironic, but people will actually value your time more when you say no once in a while. Because if you think about it, if your default answer is always yes, then that becomes an expectation. If your answer is sometimes no, then your yes is actually more valuable because it's not in infinite supply. So unless you say no once in a while, people actually think that you have no needs or that you have no limitations. So they just keep asking for more because they assume that you're going to say no when enough is enough. And being the pleasing, giving, overly generous people that we are, we have a hard time saying no. So a lot of times when we're in this situation, a people pleaser might be thinking to themselves, can't they see how exhausted I am? How can they ask me for this? And the answer is no, they can't see it. They're too caught up in their own lives and they're too worried about their own problems and they're just too distracted to pay attention to what's going on with you. They assume that you're going to draw a boundary when you need to. So what we have to do is to learn how to speak up for ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable, even when we feel guilty. And that's going to give you some very important information. The people that care about you and respect you will respect your no. The people who don't care about you, they're going to reveal themselves, and that's important information to have too.
Well, it's so important. You're absolutely, giving people, if you don't, it's like you're not their parents. Like there needs to be boundaries, as you say. And often we just want it. We go with that path of least resistance, and we suddenly make performance equals value. And I think it's what's interesting when you said that as a mediator, I have to deal with that all the time. And what I found for myself is one of my secret sauces is I kind of set it up, but before I'm going to say no or some variation of that, I set it up with, so would you be okay if I just shared what I heard you say? And people go, and as soon as you ask them to do that, they'll stop. They stop attacking and they start to listen a little differently. Yeah, okay. And I'll just share something. I say, so does that make sense? So based on that, I'm going to have to say no. And it sets you up for success in saying no. And I tell you, I don't know how many times, Natalie, I did that in a mirror before I ever did it with a person. And just practiced it until I got comfortable with it. And I just
very smart.
It's not like, I think veterinarians, medical professionals for the large are accidental entrepreneurs and are not necessarily trained in people skills. But they're amazing with animals and their passion for that. So some of this you have to work at. It's just not a natural tendency. So I just kind of building on that. So if I was to ask you kind of what advice would you give veterinarians struggle with setting boundaries due to people pleasing, and how can they communicate effectively with the clients without compromising their well-being? And that's my strategy, but I'm sure that doesn't line up well necessarily with a medical fee.
Well, it's not necessarily an all or nothing. I mean, like I said before, pleasers are extremely uncomfortable saying no because we want everyone to be happy and we want everyone to think well of us. But when you think about it, when you say yes to that, oh, by the way, just one more thing before you leave at work, what you're doing is you're saying no to yourself and you're saying no to your family. So it's not that it's right or wrong. It's a choice that you need to make with clear awareness of what you're saying no to. So the one group of people who actually seem to struggle less with those, the personal boundaries, are actually parents with small kids. Because most parents, they're not going to have a problem putting their kids first. So it's an easy decision to choose between a convenience end of the day walk-in versus the time that you're going to miss out on with your kids. So that's actually kind of useful because as pleasers, we will say no to ourselves before we say no to someone else. And if we don't have kids, we actually kind of feel guilty claiming our personal time because it's not as valuable as other people's personal time. So here's what I say to pleasers who don't have kids is imagine that you did have a small child at home and that child needs you. That child suffers when you're not there. That child is crying because they miss you so much. and that child is your mental health. And so every new thing that you're considering, whether you're going to say yes or no to it, should be weighed against the needs of that child, your mental health baby. And just like a real child, your mental health baby should always take priority.
I really like how you put that. That's a great way to, and I think I want to kind of roll back into that mental health because, we're talking about specifically with the doctor but there's a whole team. And this is something that is not specific to one area of the practice. It flows through the entire practice. So kind of just thinking about that and looking at that as an example, what kind of support systems or resources would you recommend for a veterinarian struggle with mental issues? And more with that, but with that view of that overall, the practice itself, the team itself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I would say is a lot of the medium and larger size practices have employee assistance programs, EAPs, that offer access to mental health resources, or, for example, like a certain number of free sessions with a therapist, or online resources, meditation apps, things like that, gym memberships. So if your practice offers this, please use it. If your practice doesn't offer it, ask for it, because it might just not be on their radar as something that is needed or that would be appreciated. If it's not available or your boss is not willing to provide that for you, then think about looking for a good therapist or coach on your own. Veterinary coaching is really gaining a lot of traction lately, but what the caveat that I would say is, before you hire a coach, make sure you check their experience and their credentials to make sure that they've had legit training. There's free resources available through AVMA, through VIN, the Veterinary Information Network, NOMV, Not One More Vet, and hopefully none of your listeners ever need this, but the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And there's more and more every day. I did a quick Google search, and the resources out there are literally overwhelming. There's so many of them. And something that you can do within your practice group is you can create your own little mental health support group or a book club, a self-improvement book club. And that can be really helpful, because just having people to talk to that actually understand what you're going through can make a huge difference. And to circle back to what you were saying before about, it's not just about the vet, it's about the whole team. This is also something that might not necessarily be on the radar when there's that end of the day walk-in and the vet on staff says, yeah, okay, I'll stay late and I'll see it. Well, not only are they making that decision for themselves, they're making that decision for the whole team. And there might be people that are single mothers, and there might be people who share one vehicle with somebody who works the night shift. So before you volunteer your time, if it's going to impact the other people that are working in that practice, I would say that needs to be a team conversation.
Yeah, that again, we make these assumptions sometimes. It's that we're all speaking the same language. I mean, everybody that works in a veterinary practice has a passion for animals at some level, and they have an empathy for care, and there's very clearly that. But unfortunately, that on its own it will very quickly become what is a strength. It'll become out of balance, and you just make those assumptive decisions on behalf of other people, and you don't think about what you just said of how that's going to ripple through and affect a whole bunch of other people, or potentially. And I think so. I want to kind of just think about this. Okay, so I'm a veterinarian, and I'm feeling burnt out, and the burnout is really, I'm feeling there's a lot of demanding clients. I mean, yeah, I can see that maybe my people pleasing is a part of the journey here, but there's all these clients, all this expectation, all these things are happening. Some of the realities of running a business is happening as well. So can you kind of give me some proactive steps on how I could start addressing that?
Well, yeah, it starts with awareness of what you're feeling in the moment. And what are the thoughts that are rolling around in your head? Because when somebody asks me for something and my gut reaction is, no, I don't want to, but then I hear a yes coming out of my mouth, that's a great time to build in a pause and just stop for a moment. You don't have to say yes in half a second. Think about, what does this really mean? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting this way? Why am I feeling guilty about claiming my personal time with my family? Or even if I don't have a family, even if I live alone, I'm just as entitled to my recovery time as somebody with small kids and a husband or a wife. So don't feel guilty about having your feelings. Don't talk yourself out of the way that you're feeling. Any kind of negative feeling is there for a reason. It's there to get your attention, to let you know that something's out of balance, and it's time to kind of take a step back and just dissect a little bit, like, what is it that's really going on for me? Why am I feeling this way? Because if you say yes and you say it with resentment or resistance, over the long run, that is actually going to cause more damage than if you just said no. If, the thing we're afraid of is that if we say no, that we're going to lose respect, or we're going to get yelled at by the boss, or, some kind of negative consequence is going to happen. And we don't think about when I'm saying no to myself, when I'm denying myself the time that I was looking forward to, that's going to create festering resentment. That's going to snowball slowly over a period of time. And then what happens is one day I've been suffering in silence and festering and marinating in my own toxicity, and something minor happens, and that's my last straw. And I lose it. I blow up, I start yelling, or I storm out, or I say, screw this, I quit. And to me, this has been building and building and building for a long time. And I just finally got to the point where I had enough. To everyone around me, this came out of nowhere. What the heck happened to Feynman? She just lost her mind for no reason. She's crazy. And it's such a disconnect, because we think that people know what's going on internally for us, and they don't. And so it's up to us to make sure that we are expressing our needs and that we are communicating clearly. And even if I say yes to whatever this person's asking me for, I need them to know why this is a struggle for me to say yes, and what I expect in return. Because if I'm going to carry that kind of resentment and resistance, I'm expecting them to do me some kind of a favor in return. And if I don't get it, that's only going to make my resentment worse in the future. So don't think that you have to respond in the moment, especially if you notice that you're resisting, that there's something negative about that request for you, that there's some reason why you don't wanna, but you kind of feel like you have to say yes anyway. Just pause and examine for yourself, what is it that is causing me to feel this way, without judging yourself for having those feelings, and without trying to talk yourself out of those feelings.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love the pause. That's a big part of my world, my coaching. I call it the pause that refreshes. With an unpaused comment is more often driven by emotions that may not even be applicable to that moment, but have been gathered up based on past experience. Where a paused response, and through what we call the lens of unconditional curiosity, which is curiosity without opinion, expectation, and judgment, starting with myself, creates a space for reasoned response, which allows an answer that is not emotionally driven. It can be emotionally informed, but it just sets up what you're saying, creates that space where we're worth it. We're valuable enough. We're worth fighting for. And if we don't, we're going to be in a hospital bed. And how useful are we there? And
exactly.
That's the downside of this. And we talk, if we think of what we see in those conflicts when somebody just loses their stuff, is the visible portion of an iceberg. The 1/3 is that issue, that hot spot.
Perfect.
But what really is happening is underneath that, the invisible portion, the other 2/3 is their underlying interests, we call them, which are needs, desires, concerns, and fears. That's what's driving it. I don't think I've only had maybe 1 or 2 mediations in my career that have been specific to something that was visible.
I believe that. I love
by the time it gets to me, they've had all their stuffs happen, but the reality, when we peel back the layers of the onion, we find it will not be what we think it is. It's always going to be, not always, but in my experience with probably thousands plus mediations, I have seen a lot of stuff, and it's only very, very extreme, seldom when it's not. But and I think that's so. Just so you're not, nobody is the exception here. Everybody has got stuff going on, and our emotions love to hijack us and take us hostage in these moments. But what Dr. Feynman's talking about is this idea of pausing and creating space for you to get a more reasoned response that's more reflective of you and the circumstances rather than what your emotions think are important. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think this. So the one I just sort of setting us up. I didn't mean to do this, but I just realized I did. But I want to talk now. The time that we have, I want to talk about rewiring your brain for stress resilience, which is kind of what I'm talking about. But let's. Can you share with us, Doctor, some effective techniques for rewiring the brain to build stress resilience? I love that, and how these can be applied in the fast-paced environment of veterinary clinics. And boy, is that ever the truth?
Definitely. And like anything else, it's a skill. We're not born with it. We need to learn how to do it, and it needs practice and repetition before it can actually be functional. So at first, there's going to be a little bit of patience and consistency and repetition. But I will definitely tell you that this is actually how the light bulb went off in my head. We learned when I went through the coach training program in positive intelligence, we learned a specific technique for shifting our brain activation from left brain to right brain focus. Left brain focus is where all of our stress programming is. So shifting to a right brain focus helps us to calm down the stress response and be able to see things with more clarity and to be able to respond and react from a place without fear, to be able to make sure that we're taking the right actions for the right reasons and not just reacting out of stress or self-protection. So we learned this technique, and it's, pretty simple thing. So just like basically just rubbing your two fingertips together and just paying attention to the sensation of the fingertip ridges. And what this is doing is you're drawing your attention to a physical sensation. And if you can direct enough of your attention to this physical sensation, then all the mind chatter and the worrying and the ruminating and the what if this and what's going to happen later, all that it turns down the volume on that. So you're building up these new neural pathways to be able to create that shift. Now, when I first started my training, I was like, what the heck is this finger rubbing thing? This is nothing. This doesn't do anything. So I'm doing this 3-4 times a day for like 2 minutes at a time, thinking, okay, I'm going to just check the box that I did it, but this is stupid. It's not going to work. And I'm just going to do it anyway, just to say that I did it. And so I did this for like 3-4 weeks. And then one day, I don't even remember, something happened at work. It just pissed me off and just sent me like off the cliff. And I was like, what the heck is going on? What are these people thinking? So I go outside just to walk around the block, and I start rubbing my fingertips together. And within 10 seconds, I felt this wave of calm just sweep over my entire body like magic. It stopped me dead in my tracks. I was like, oh my God, it actually works. And only because I had practiced it over and over, just like an exercise that builds up your muscles slowly over time, I had built up those neural pathways that immediately shifted my emotional state in the moment when I needed it. And it was crazy how well it worked. So I have adapted this. And what I teach to my clients is to if you close your eyes and just bring up a visual of something that just makes you feel peaceful, calm, contented emotions, whether, it could be your pet, your spouse, your child, or a happy childhood memory. So when you close your eyes and you bring up that visual and you allow it to evoke those positive emotions, then I have people practice this rubbing your fingertips together at the same time. And so what you're doing is you're creating an association between the physical movement of rubbing your fingertips and shifting to that emotional state. And so if you practice that for 30 to 60 seconds at a time, 4 or 5 times a day, within a few weeks, and like I said, for me, it was about 3-4 weeks, you will find that you can actually use that on demand. And the more you practice it in times when you are calm and not at work stressed out and overwhelmed, it's like an athlete training for the big event. They train when the pressure is off so that they can perform when the pressure is on. So the more you practice, the more you'll be able to call it up when you need it in the moment. And it's crazy how well and how fast it works. encourage all of your listeners to try it.
Yes, well, I'm very familiar with the technique, and it's awesome. In fact, I found in practice that we find that the different learning styles, if your dominant learning style is tactile, then we start you right away with something physical that you're going to do, that because it immediately triggers your learning style. If you're visual like me, I need a word picture, I need a visual. So my mechanism was stop, drop, and roll. What do you know to do? If you're on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. So I just immediately, when I be in those stress moments, I just think stop, drop, and roll. And I immediately go to think, yeah, well, I'm not on fire. But by the time I processed all that, that a wave has passed, and now I have reasoned response.
Absolutely.
And other folks need words that are associated with it. Yeah. But the physical aspect, I've actually taken clients that are just so overwhelmed, everything's going crazy, and I just want you to walk up to the post office 2 blocks away and get the mail. That's not my job. Blah, blah, blah. So just do it. You're paying me. Just trust me. And they do. It's just, that was amazing. Like, it's funny. It's such subtle little things that we think, but that's the thing that we, as I think in medical professionals, it's okay not to be okay. You haven't got everything figured out. You're super brilliant, but there's some stuff around you in self-awareness that just is not, it's not a given. It's not a natural, and it can get out of balance really quick, which is what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
I want to kind of build on that and talk a bit about neuroplasticity and the role. How does neuroplasticity play a role in adapting to stress, and what strategies can veterinarians use to rewire their brains to better handle stressful situations? I know maybe you just unpack that a little bit for our listeners, depending on where people's knowledge level is, and that kind of bring it to a common denominator, and then speak on that.
Yeah, definitely. So that little self-command technique that I was talking about before, it's just one of a whole constellation of techniques that we use to achieve that same effect. But it is an example of how that neuroplasticity actually allows us to rewire our brains at any age. I'm in my 50s. I've been practicing the way I react to stress and the way I perform under whatever the circumstances are at work. I've been practicing that for my whole life. So it's important for me to have realistic expectations about how long it's going to take me to learn a different way of being. So we kind of all start the foundations of how we respond to stress and uncertainty. We start learning that when we're little kids, and we just keep building on it, and we carry that with us through our whole adult lives. That doesn't mean that that's the way that you have to be for the rest of your life. So, for example, like the neural pathways that start firing when you see your boss stomping down the hallway in a bad mood, those are the ones that you have used and practiced the most. So you're going to respond, you're going to tense up, you're going to back off, you're going to look for a place to hide, however it is that you normally respond, because that's what you've practiced, and that's what it's just on autopilot. It becomes a habit. So when you practice something different, like the technique that I just described, it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel clunky. It's going to feel like it's not working. You have to do it often enough that those new brain pathways start to get stronger and faster, and they will start to respond, and they'll start to override the default pathways that we had before. So I was thinking about last night, like an example of this, actually, when you feel yourself falling, most people's natural reaction is going to be to put their hands out to break their fall, right? And that's how a lot of us end up breaking our wrists, especially as we get older. I started training in judo when I was 14, and the first thing they teach you in judo is how to fall without hurting yourself. Right. And so I, think I'm having a great time learning a martial art, learning how to defend myself. This is great. And so flash forward to now I'm 30 years old. I'm on a mountain biking trip with my boyfriend at the time, and we are flying down this hill, like going way too fast. And my tire hits a hole that I did not see. And within a split second, before I had a chance to think about it, I was fully airborne, flying through the air. Don't even know how fast I was going, headed face first into the ground. Before I even knew what happened, I had rolled and I was standing straight up on my feet. And I just had a few little scrapes. I had a perfect little scratch that went up one arm, across the back of my shoulders, and down the other arm, because I had rolled without even thinking about it. And so that natural reflex of throwing your hands out, that, of course, just like anybody else, that was pre-programmed into me when I was a child. But I had overridden that because of my intentional training and the constant repetition. And those are the reflexes that kicked in when I needed them. So whatever thought patterns and behavior patterns you've been practicing, that's going to be your default until you build up a new pathway, a new way of doing things, a new way of thinking about things. And so when you practice a better response, you get a better outcome. It sounds simple. It is simple. It's just not easy because we have such a tendency to go back to our old familiar practiced habits. Anybody that's ever tried to lose weight or tried to stop smoking can probably attest to how hard it is to change old habits. But this is where a trained coach or therapist can actually be your best friend, because it's a lot easier to do this with somebody who can help you through that process than to try and figure it out on your own, because setbacks are inevitable. You're going to get frustrated. Frustration just makes people want to give up and say, oh, this is never going to change for me. I'm stuck doing it this way. And that's just not true.
Yeah. And I think that's when you said that getting unstuck on your own is very difficult. I didn't know I needed a coach until kind of after I was a coach, to be quite honest. But what's interesting is that now I can't imagine not having one, because there's nowhere in my life that I have an agenda-free space except with my coach. And it's so important to have. It's not, for these, I'm a little older now. I'm still learning every day. I'm learning today, but I learn, but I also, but now I give a lot of it away in terms of my coaching, in terms of my life experience and stuff. When you're in the early years, the coaching is really important you're just learning some of these skills, some of the things that's what a coach offers you, is techniques and processes to look at things differently. I like to say, Natalie, if you think about a fruit plate and you've got a bunch of pieces of fruit on, you have a couple of lights shining on it. That's the way you see the fruit. But what Natalie would do as a coach for you, she'd move those lights. And she doesn't tell you, we're going to move them this way, this is the way to do it. She's going to move them, and you get to see what you see differently and how you want to be the best version of you. And that's the beauty of a coach. It's really hard to do that on your own. It really is. And
it really is. Even for coaches, you're 100% right. Like, I still to this day have new light bulbs every single time I get together with my coach. We are so much better suited to be able to see what's going on with other people's drama, but we can't see our own because we're so far sunk into it.
Yeah, it's that saying, the forest for the trees, right? Yeah, I always like to say your system's perfectly designed to achieve the results you get. If you're having an assembly line and every fourth car coming off the assembly line, every fourth car is missing its right front fender, then your system's perfectly designed to achieve that. No point of pointing and yelling at the missing fender is going to change it until you change the system. But we're resistant to change which is ironic, because we actually love change. You hit the nail on. You loved losing 85 pounds. The transition was a little tough. It was a lot of work, and transition is the thing. But we have a negative. But just to what we're talking about, we have a negative stereotype attached to emotional connection, that we don't like change, but we actually love it. It's just the transition is hard, which is what we're talking about with some of these processes that Natalie's describing. I don't want to dig any further into the coaching realm on this, but I kind of, just as we're kind of wrapping up our time, I mean, obviously mindfulness and self-care is so important in maintaining mental well-being for anybody, in particular for veterinarians. Is there anything you'd suggest they could incorporate into their daily practice as a starting point?
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to start off by saying that, number one, our self-care is non-negotiable, and yet it is always the first thing that we sacrifice. Self-care can be whatever you want it to be. And for different people, it's different things. It could be sleep for one person. It could be vacation time for someone else. But I think as sciencey people, a lot of us in veterinary medicine, we kind of have a negative concept of what mindfulness is, because we kind of picture, sitting in a lotus position, focusing on our breath, or, whatever it is. That's great. If that moves the needle for you, that's fantastic. And I encourage you to keep doing it. I'm not one of those people that really gets anywhere by focusing on my breath. other than these looping thoughts. Oh, this is stupid. This isn't going to do anything. For me, I get a lot of satisfaction on directing mindfulness towards whatever it is that I'm eating or drinking, because I've had such a lifelong history of soothing myself with food. But yet we eat unconsciously. We eat while we're watching TV, while we're scrolling social media, and we don't pay attention before you know it. You look down, your plate's empty. Where did it go? If I actually sit there with no interruptions, no distractions, close my eyes, and I put the first bite of food in my mouth and I hold it there, and I just really focus on the sensations, the flavor, the aroma, the texture, the temperature, where, like, even to the point of, like, where on my tongue am I tasting the sweet? Where am I tasting the salty part, or whatever it is? How long can I keep tasting it in my mouth after I've already swallowed it? The warmth of the sensation of it sliding down my throat into my stomach. This is actually, it's a really helpful technique for anybody that's trying to lose weight, because when you do that, number one, you're going to get a whole lot more satisfaction out of the food that you're eating. You're going to eat slower. You're going to eat less. So it really helps to reduce the mindless eating, but it doesn't have to have anything to do with food. If you just take 10 seconds out of your busy day and focus on some detail in your environment around you, whatever it is, it could be a flower that you see outside your window. It could be something on your desk that has kind of a little sparkle to it, or just seems interesting to you. Just taking a moment to focus on something that you find beautiful or appealing or enjoyable about your environment. We rush through our lives on autopilot. We don't notice the details of what's going on around us. And that's how we end up, like, blinking and saying, what happened to the last 30 years? It just flew by. And so it's so important to just really make yourself get in the habit of pausing and just enjoying something in the moment that you're in, and just give yourself permission to stop worrying about who's waiting for you, or how late you're going to be at work that day, or worrying about how you're going to get ready for this meeting that you have to go to. Just give yourself permission to let your brain take a vacation for 10 seconds here and there. And this is one of those things that I approached with a lot of skepticism when I first started doing it, because this is woo-woo BS. It's not going to work. It's not going to do anything. But after I practiced doing it for several weeks, I actually started to realize, wow, I feel so much better after I do this. And once I started to really connect with how it shifted the way I was feeling, then I started looking for excuses. How can I do more of this? Where can I sneak it into, like, a different part of my day? How can I do something a little bit different that's going to have the same effect on me? So it's something, at first, it starts off as a chore. It's one more thing I got to remember. It's one more thing I have to do on my list. But when you feel it working, when you feel the benefits in your body, it's not work anymore. It's a joy, and you'll look for reasons to do it.
And you are worth it, so work it, as
yes,
you would say.
100%.
So, well, thank you, Dr. Feynman. Our time is coming to an end, and I so appreciate you being with us today, sharing your insights and talking to us about people-pleasing, burnout, and building a resilient mind in veterinary medicine. I think we've covered all those bases well. And if I was to sum it up, you've kind of made the complex simple, the hidden visible, and the difficult easy. You can reach Dr. Feynman at her website, which is No Limits Coaching Now, all one word, nolimitscoachingnow.com. And she's also on LinkedIn. You can reach her there as well. But I want to also take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, please share it with your friends and colleagues. What a great opportunity for you to set somebody else up for success, and be able to start working on the things that they're struggling with as well. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review. We love reviews, and they will help other doctors and practice owners find us as well. So thank you for the privilege of your time. And until next time, on behalf of Dr. Feynman, keep striving for excellence, taking great care of yourself and making a positive impact in the lives of your patients and pet parents. Wishing all of you an amazing week ahead. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.